Good afternoon. I'm Jillian Black, and welcome to the Department of Family and Support Services Hotel Motel Shelter Program RFP webinar. Joining me today are project managers Shannon Gatto and Lucy Morales with our Homeless Services Department, here to provide details and to answer any questions you may have regarding this RFP. Just a few housekeeping rules. Due to the volume of participants, everyone has been placed on mute. Please submit questions via the question box, and we will respond to questions at the midpoint and at the end of the presentation. Please use the question box to notify us of any technical issues. Please be advised that this webinar is being recorded. Anything stated at this webinar is not intended to change the solicitation document. Any changes will be in writing in the form of an addendum issued by the Department of Family and Support Services. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information for the solicitation. A copy of the recording will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel with a link to the recording, and a PDF of the PowerPoint slides will be posted to the DFSS webpage at cityofchicago.gov under the alerts and/or funding opportunity tabs. Please give it up to 5 business days to upload. DFSS also retains the right to share a list of registrants to this webinar, along with their contact and organizational information at our discretion. As for the agenda, we will go through the purpose, information about the scope and program description, the selection criteria, the timeline, technical assistance for applicants and e-procurement, and then one last round for questions. And with that being said, I'll hand it over to Shannon and Lucy.
Thank you, Jillian. Hopefully you can all hear us okay, but good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Gatto, project manager on the homeless services team, and I'll just have my colleagues just quickly come off mute and introduce themselves as well. So Lucy, I'll pass it to you, and then Kim.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucy Morales, also project manager on the homeless services team.
And hi all, I'm Kimberly Howard. I'm a director with the Homeless Services Division here at DFSS.
Thank you. So we appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the Hotel Motel RFP that we've released. And as you probably saw from the actual RFP narrative, the purpose of this opportunity is to seek applications from organizations who are interested in operating a year-round hotel, motel room, shelter, and support service project that targets single adults and couples experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The RFP is part of our department and division's response to expand access to quality non-congregate shelter, especially given extreme weather advisories that are happening year-round, and for encampment initiatives that we have throughout the year. This program really aims as a baseline to provide safe, accessible place for folks to stay, while also supporting those clients in moving towards stable and permanent housing options as well. Next slide, please. So just to give a little bit more specifics around the goals of this RFP, so we are seeking providers who can operate at least 30 shelter beds in a non-congregate hotel motel setting for that specific unsheltered population. We're looking to have referrals come through street outreach teams, as well as coordination through DFSS and 311 year-round. We really seek to have programs that can operate flexibly by scaling up or down the number of people that are being served in the rooms based off of kind of the needs of our system in unsheltered locations throughout the year. We want providers and programs to have a clear plan for reducing barriers to accessing their program, as well as providing support services and linkages to support services if they're not provided on site, with that focus on permanent housing pathways. And then as well, thinking about and implementing policies and procedures that really focus on supporting a client based off of their needs and doing it in a trauma-informed harm reduction way. Next slide, please. So some of you may be familiar with kind of the context and current priorities for improvement, both locally and nationally, but just to give a little bit of an overview of this portion of the RFP narrative. So national trends, especially post-pandemic, Chicago and nationally, we've kind of unfortunately seen an increase in the number of people experiencing homelessness, especially in unsheltered locations based off of the 2024 PIT count, which is our annual snapshot that took place in 2024 on the 25th of January. There was about a 65% increase in the estimate of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in our city, with almost half of those people being counted and residing on the CTA trains or in stations. There's a lot of different factors that contribute to both the national and local trends of increases in unsheltered and sheltered homelessness, but some of it has been linked partly to pandemic supports expiring, such as, the child tax credit and some state local supports around emergency SNAP benefits, and just having less resources that were able to help folks stay stabilized in housing. And, we've also seen a bit of a shift in the housing market, and there's less affordable housing options, which has led to kind of this national trend of homelessness increasing. As far as local priorities in Chicago, it is a large system priority to address and reduce the number of folks experiencing unsheltered homelessness in our city. We developed a 3-tier encampment strategy through the creation of our interagency city task force in 2016, which really has worked to think through a way to engage different individuals at encampments, kind of based on the different sizes of encampments, et cetera, and how to best support them in moving towards stable and permanent housing. And then more recently in 2023, our continuum of care received $60 million additional dollars through a special funding SNOFO award, and have also been able to secure and work with the All Inside Unsheltered initiative, which really focuses on increasing and better coordinating across the continuum of care for unsheltered homelessness, and also helping with outreach capacity and expertise in our system to reduce and address unsheltered homelessness as well. And so kind of based off of these local priorities, we've really tried to expand access to quality, safe shelter, especially in non-congregate settings. And, this is a priority that we hope to, have for the next few years, and can share some more of those details on some of the subsequent slides. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lucy to share a little bit more about the target population and program requirements.
Next slide. Thank you. The target population is individuals and couples that are experiencing literal unsheltered homelessness, meaning those that don't have a fixed nighttime residence and are often sleeping in public or private places not meant for human habitation. This can be the CTA or encampments or parks, abandoned buildings, anything like that. This population can include people with limited English proficiency, people on the sex offender registry, people with disability, people with justice involvement backgrounds, people who identify as LGBTQ, people with chronic drug use, people with mental health conditions, and survivors of gender-based violence. The comprehensive list is listed in the RFP, and DFSS is interested in programs that demonstrate a strong understanding of this population and its unique needs and how to serve them. Next slide, please. More program requirements. The applicant is expected to secure sites, hotel sites, either by themselves or through a subcontractor. Sites can either be a block of rooms at one site or scattered sites, although one site project is preferred. Programs can have to be within the city limits of Chicago and must have a minimum of 30 beds with the ability to scale up or down as needed. Proposed programs should make arrangements to use the facility's office or non-guest room spaces, have access to facility utilities like Wi-Fi, phone, or TV, and security cameras. Plan for on-site laundry, trash removal, using of common areas, room cleanings, and just room cleanings between client stays. They should also, this again, it's not, you can refer to more of the program requirements in the RFP. Next slide, please. Some of the essential services that this delegate would provide would be providing 3 meals a day or other material supports like welcome kits, hygiene kits, bus cards, things of that nature. Supportive services and linkages to services that they cannot provide themselves. And this can be anything from mental health services, employment services, counseling, legal services, things like that. They should provide quality case management focused on housing placements and overcoming housing barriers. They should have staff that are trained in de-escalation techniques and provide client-centered trauma-informed services. They should have 24/7 staff coverage. And they should be a low barrier access point where they must eliminate some barriers to shelter like sobriety, behavioral requirements, or other barriers that often people see when accessing shelter. The programs must also report available occupied rooms to our centralized shelter intake, and they should reflect the Chicago COC core values of housing first approach, harm reduction, trauma-informed care, inclusion of persons of lived experience and input. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Lucy. So in terms of performance goals and outcomes, DFSS is always seeking respondents that have evidence of strong past performance for these desired outcomes. And so we always like to include some of the performance indicators that we use in our RFPs and like to keep track of as we move through a contract with different programs. And so you can see this table here. It has both a threshold, which is kind of like the baseline minimum expectation, as well as a challenge metric, which is just a little bit more of a, I guess, challenge or a harder, more attainable goal that we'd like our delegates to think about. And so these are the same indicators that we're thinking about for our shelter programs, emergency shelter programs. So thinking about for the threshold as a baseline, at least 30% of the participants who exit from this particular program would move to more stable or permanent housing destinations. And then the challenge or threshold harder metric to meet is that, those participants would be exiting to permanent housing destinations, about 27% in shelter. And then, of course, thinking about participants who maintain or increase income, which includes employment, income, as well as benefits. And then completion of coordinated entry assessments, trying to keep that as a baseline of 40, but challenge of 60%. And then to also help the agencies that are funded through this contract, we keep track of outputs, which help to kind of monitor a program and ensure that they are able to kind of move towards those outcomes longer term. And so one of the outputs that we have proposed for this is having a 95% room utilization rate across all the sites that a proposed program would be operating under this contract. And that would be throughout the time period of the contract as well. Next slide, please, Jillian. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Lucy.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm going to go through some of the selection criteria. One of the selection criteria is the delegate's community involvement. The respondent should demonstrate a clear understanding of the unsheltered population, including their strengths, needs, and barriers to housing. The respondent should also have developed specific competencies and/or infrastructure to better serve people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The respondent should also provide a full account of practices aimed at fostering or improving inclusion internally. Their leadership would ideally reflect or work to reflect different communities and the target population. The respondent should also demonstrate client and community engagement activities that inform service delivery. Next slide, please. DFSS will also evaluate applicants on organizational capacity. The respondent should identify the essential personnel that are going to be devoted to this work. Describe the appropriate staffing pattern and the qualifications that are needed for that staff. And of course, in the contents of the people that they're serving, as well as a number of staff that are needed to execute this work. The respondent should also provide a clear explanation on how the staff, how to staff and how they're going to fill the positions. The respondent will also have adequate systems and processes to support monitoring program expenditures and fiscal controls. The respondent should also have secure data collection and management practices, along with adequate processes to assure timely data. The respondent should also have identified a site location. The description of room configuration is very clear, and they have an understanding of the location, and the location seems appropriate to serve people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The respondent should also plan to operate with a flexible bed capacity to scale up or down as needed as it relates to weather emergencies or other encampment initiatives. Next slide, please. Another selection criteria that the DFSS is evaluating is strength of proposed program. The respondent should describe the program in detail, tie specific elements of the target population, needs, and outcomes of the RFP. The respondent's proposed program aligns with best practices in the field. The respondent has an effective and intentional approach to addressing conflict and plans to train staff to have the necessary skills to de-escalate conflict and de-escalate conflict effectively, and plan for room checks and monitoring guests to ensure safety. The respondent would also have partnerships with other agencies to improve on services and provide services that are provided in a client-centered and comprehensive way. The client should also plan to manage or have a subcontractor who manages the booking and would, in their response, explain how they will coordinate with the motel hotel management to turn around rooms and manage phone access and other logistics. Next slide, please. Another criteria is performance management and outcomes. DFSS will evaluate the respondents based on demonstrating an evidence of strong performance against desired outcomes and goals and performance metrics. And other notable accomplishments. They will also evaluate the respondent on their experience in using data and identifying problems in service delivery, and how it informs and improves its services and the services it renders. The respondent would also have experience disaggregating data to identify and address racial, gendered, abled, and other disparities in program delivery. Next slide, please. DFSS will also evaluate on reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage a fund. So the respondent has a the respondent should have a fiscal capacity to implement the program proposed prior to the reimbursement. The respondent should also leverage other in-kind funds and contributions to support the program and its administrative costs. The respondent should also demonstrate and implement cost and funding requests, and as well as the proposed scope of work or work plan. Next slide, please. Pass it back to Shannon.
Thank you. So in terms of attachments, so there are some pieces that are required, and then there's one piece that is optional. So we just wanted to remind you of those things when submitting your application. There's an optional item that is in relation to one of the scored questions or selection criteria that Lucy just went over, and it is to attach reports, data, or past documentation that shows previous performance in reaching program goals and demonstrates results and accomplishments in a similar fashion for a program that is similar to this or a similar program model at least. And then as a reminder for required items, so just make sure that you submit your proposed program's budget proposal. All the attachments are kind of in the same section of the application, so should be hopefully easy to kind of go through those, and just make sure that with your budget that you have all of the program requirements that are addressed and reflected in your budget based off of what is in the program requirements section of the RFP. And then I believe Jillian will go through these in a bit more detail, but just there's a series of attesting uploads that you'll want to make sure to include. I won't go through the exhaustive list here, but it's here in the slides and is also in the application on e-procurement. But some of those include proof of liability insurance, the current list of your board members for your agency, your certificate of good standing with the state of Illinois, your most recent financial statement or audit, and a few other items as well. And I will also make a note because I'm seeing there's a few questions in the chat. And so if folks have other questions as we move through the rest of the presentation, we'll take time at the end to answer questions. So please feel free to leave your questions there, or there'll be some time at the end if you want to come off mute and have anything clarified as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a general reminder about the evaluation process. So DFSS evaluates all applications based on the strengths of the proposals and the responsiveness to the selection criteria and those scored kind of sections that Lucy went over. Failure to submit a complete proposal or respond fully to all of the requirements may deem your submission subject to rejection. Our commissioner, upon review of recommended agencies, may reject, deny, or recommend agencies that have applied for grants based off of previous performance and or the need in a specific area. And then DFSS reserves the right to ensure that all mandated services are available citywide and provided in a linguistically and culturally appropriate manner. Next slide, please. So this is just to kind of highlight the next steps with the timeline. So just some things to be aware of. Obviously, the pre-proposal webinar is happening today. The due date for questions that you have about the application and the RFP are due by the 15th on Tuesday. And Jillian, I don't know, is there a specific time on Tuesday that they need to have those?
Close of business, 5 p.m.
Okay, 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 15th for those submission of pre-proposal questions that you want to be answered by our team. And then the application window, it's open for a total of 5 weeks. So the final deadline that you need to make sure your proposal is submitted by is Thursday, November 7th at 12 p.m. Central Time. And then, of course, the contract period, the program period would begin the 1st of January of 2025. So I'll pass it, I believe, to Jillian next, or is there? Oh no, I still have more. There's budgets. So for the proposal, the budget proposal, these are just some key things to keep in mind. So your budget should be reflective of 1 year, 12 months of services. The term of the contract in the RFP is from January 1st of 2025 through December 31st of 2026. So that is, oh, sorry, that is supposed to be 2025, I believe, actually. It is supposed to be December 31st of 2025, a 1-year contract. So we will fix that. And the amount of this RFP for 1 year is between $1,650,000 to $3,300,000, depending on the size of the proposed programs in the application. There's an administrative cap for the program at 10% per application. And agencies and subcontractors must be able to demonstrate at least a 10% in-kind match for the program. In terms of some of the things to keep in mind for the budget, so just make sure to be thoughtful and inclusive when developing your budget. Make sure that you apply for your program's actual costs, since DFSS can generally not give you more money than what you ask for in your budget. And then there is a reasonable cost question under the budget justifications selection criteria that Lucy went over. And so that question is really to understand and allow applicants to justify their proposed costs that are reflected in your budget. So make sure that for that response, you are able to connect the dots between your budget and what is in your application. Next slide, please. So just some tips around common errors that we sometimes see in applications for budget proposals. Fringe, you'll just want to make sure that you check your fringe estimates and benefits. That is under the personnel tab towards the bottom. Supplies is under the non-personnel tab of the budget document. You want to make sure that you try to accurately capture what supplies are being estimated there, and there's like a description field so you can add descriptors to that to make it clear. Client assistance, you can add in some details around client assistance if that's appropriate for your proposed program. And then in the application and your budget, there are some questions that ask about proposed staffing and job positions. So you just want to ensure that the job positions and descriptions that you provide in your application are obviously reflected in your budget as well. And you also want to make sure that you show that 10% in-kind match and any other details that are specified in the RFP. All right, and then this is just the final reminder. Applications are due on Thursday, November 7th at 12 p.m. noon Central Time. So I think it's now time for me to turn it over to Jillian.
Thank you, Shannon. Just a few application tips. We cannot stress enough to start your application as early as possible and to save it as often as possible. If you have never done business with the City of Chicago, please register into e-procurement ASAP. Review RFP narratives and application questions closely. Remember that they align with the scope and the selection criteria. Use the information in the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. There is a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces. Each response is allowed at 4,000 characters. And please do not use the back button on your browser. You may have to start your application over. Just FYI. To submit multiple applications for an RFP, applicants will need to set up a unique user account in iSupplier. The e-procurement system is not capable of submitting more than one distinct proposal per associated email address. Therefore, you must use a separate email address for each submittal. You can submit your application and later amend it up until the due date of November 7th, 2024 at 12 noon. Avoid the rush and possible mishaps by submitting early. Plan on the submission taking approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Please be advised that late applications cannot and will not be accepted. For questions, please make use of the e-procurement hotline at 312-744-4357. Please note that the hotline operates during business hours only, which is Monday through Friday, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. And then once again, I would like to let you guys know to save as often as possible and submit as early as possible. Just a few agency requirements. We require articles of incorporation and any amended articles of incorporation. We also require an IRS affirmation letter. This is for non-for-profit agencies only. This letter must be dated within 60 days of submission. You can obtain this by calling the IRS directly at 1-877-829-5500. If you are a for-profit agency, please submit your original letter with the IRS showing your FEIN number. We now require a UEI number as well as the central contractor registration. And that can be provided, just provide a copy of the entity overview page, and that can be found on the www.sam.gov website. And lastly, a certificate of good standing letter with the state of Illinois is required. As of April of this year, we have a new labor peace agreement ordinance. This will apply to all DFSS and CDPH delegates that have 20 or more employees working for their organization. The only exemption is it does not apply to hospitals. It applies, contractor must provide written notice to the commissioner or her designee within 72 hours of becoming aware that employees want to organize or that a union seeks to represent employees. Contractor must enter into this LPA within 90 days of receiving notice from a labor organization that it represents or seeks to represent employees. You may ask, what is an LPA? It is an agreement between an employer and a labor union that ensures that an organizing drive is not impacted by union busting techniques, including employee retaliation. And in return, they will stop or strike work in a way that will impact human services. For technical assistance, there's a link on the DFSS webpage to the RFP and the interest and training documents. This can be found under alerts on the website. And then for questions on registration and e-procurement technical assistance for delegate agencies, please reach out to customer support at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. And they also can be reached by phone at 312-744-4357. And there are also training materials, which includes documents and videos on the City of Chicago website under online training materials. Now we're going to delve into entering your responses and accepting your amendments. Step 1, you must create quote from the drop-down menu in the actions box and then click on Go. This will take you to the application page where you can get started. If the RFP you are interested in has been amended, you will need to acknowledge and accept the amendment to start and/or submit a response. To accept the amendment, click on View Amendment History. Next, to begin the acceptance and acknowledgement process, follow these steps after clicking View Amendment History. First, you must click on the document number. Second, you click on the infinity or eyeglass icon to review the amended changes to the RFP. Click on the Acknowledge Amendments button to acknowledge receipt and understanding of these changes and then proceed. By acknowledging the amendment, you are indicating that you are aware of the changes made to the RFP in the amendment. When you get to this screen, you click on the I accept checkbox and then click on Acknowledge. Then you click on Yes to indicate that you confirm the acknowledgement of the amendment. Finally, click on the checkbox that you accept the terms and conditions and then click on Accept to actually accept them. And that is the final step in acknowledging and accepting the amendment. And once you accept an amendment, then you can move forward with submitting your actual application. And when you are ready to submit your application, you can start by saving your draft one last time and then clicking Continue. If you are missing information, e-procurement will give you an error message at the top of the page. Usually the error message directs to something left undone in the application. In the last example, the error message indicated that the lines found under the Lines tab had not been filled out or had not been completed. In this example, the error is about an unanswered question in the application or in the requirement section. The quote value refers to your, in this case, missing answer. Once your application is free from errors and you are ready to proceed and submit. At this point, clicking continue should put your application into the review and submit phase. And then once you see this page, this will be your last chance to review all of your data. It's like a summary page, and then you can confirm that it's accurate. Check all of your attachments and scroll to the very bottom of the screen to see all of your responses. And then at the bottom of the screen, you will be asked to provide an electronic signature. Please be sure to fill in the signature before checking that box. And then once you submitted, you signed and checked the box, you are ready to submit. You can click submit at the bottom right hand of the page screen. Make sure that you see this submission application, the submission confirmation screen. The e-procurement system will send a confirmation email within 24 hours of your submission. Please feel free to call or email me if you desire confirmation prior to then. We're gonna pause one last time for questions. The team has been answering questions throughout the webinar, and all of the questions and answers will be provided in the form of an amendment. And please note that our question deadline isn't until October 15th. So please feel free, if you happen to have any questions after this webinar, to send them to the program team. Their contact information will be provided on the next slide. Shannon, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a correction of something that I had said earlier. So apologies if this was potentially confusing, but on the slide that showed the contract period, it's from January 1st of 2025 through December 31st of 2026. So it is over those 2 years. And the details around the contract term can be found in section F of the RFP under the anticipated term of contract and funding source. So you can see those details there. But I just wanted to clarify and apologize that I had misremembered when we were doing the webinar. So just wanted to say that. And then so your budget will still reflect a 12-month contract period as if you were providing services for this program just over the course of 1 year when you submit it with your application. But if anyone would like to, I don't know if they have the ability to come off mute, but if you'd like to put more questions into the chat, our team can continue to answer those there.
Thank you, Shannon. We do have all of the registrants to the webinar on mute, but if they have any questions, you can ask them here or send them to the program team. Again, the question deadline is October 15th, 2024. And you can reach Shannon Ghetto at 312-743-0175 and at shannon.ghetto@cityofchicago.org. And if you have any non-programmatic questions, if you have any questions regarding the e-procurement, please reach out to e-procurement hotline. Again, they're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they can be reached at 312-744-4357 and at customersupport@cityofchicago.org. And you can also reach out to me. My name is Jillian Black, and I can be reached at jillian.black@cityofchicago.org. I do see one last question. It says, Shannon, I think you said this, but confirming the budget range is annual, but the contract term is for 2 years. So we could assume the total budget is approximately double the provided range. And all questions will be answered in the form of the amendment. So.
Sorry, I'm just rereading your question. The contract term is for 2 years. The total budget is approximately double the provided range. So whatever you put in your budget should reflect 1 year of services. So the assumption is if you were to put your budget for 1 year, that your costs would probably remain similar, and then the full cost would be doubled what you put for the annual budget.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. And let me see. It says the IRS letter needs to be dated within 60 days of submission. Yes, that's correct. And again, every question that was asked and every answer that was provided will be provided and uploaded in the form of an amendment. And the last day to ask questions is October 15th of this year. And for the program team, do you have any other questions? I mean, any other comments, anything to close out with?
No, just encourage you to go through and review the programmatic requirements for the program, especially for the hotel motel sites, and looking at some of the differences between having one site with a block of rooms versus scatter site options. And then if you do have any other questions for us prior to your submission, just make sure you get us those questions in the next 5 days, and we can follow up and post an amendment with some additional information as needed. But we appreciate everyone's time on this webinar, and look forward to reviewing applications.
All right, thank you everyone for attending the webinar and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Al.